All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, with the start of the NBA season literally right around the corner, who has what it takes to be the team to beat in the Western Conference? Now, I want to start off with the Golden State Warriors. And of course, the question is, do the Warriors have another title run in them? We've seen this franchise go out there and win four NBA championships since 2015. The gang was all back last season, so to speak. And when it was all said and done, the Warriors are able to win. Obviously, there was a lot of youth that was influxed in that crew as well. But you look at it, and I mean, it's a solid balance of veterans, savvy veterans who have kind of been there and done that, and then the youth as well. You have Steph Curry, who is still one of the premier perimeter scorers in the NBA. Klay Thompson, he we saw last year he was really getting his legs back from under him. He's still not the Klay from before all of the injuries, but he is still somebody that has to be respected. The Draymond factor. And this is going to be a big talking point for the Warriors throughout the season. Of course, we all know what recently went down between Draymond Green and Jordan Poole during a practice. Of course, the video leaked. Really don't need to go into specifics for that. But nonetheless, how is that going to hang over this team? Will that be a distraction? We're going to have to wait and see for it. But even with that all said and done, Draymond is still very important to this team. I don't know if Draymond Green could be as important to another team if he was playing on it, but nonetheless, for these Warriors, Draymond is definitely important due to his energy. He's not the he's not the shooter that he was earlier in his career from deep. Never really was the greatest three-point shooter, but he's still a solid facilitator. Still a solid defender. Maybe not as hands-on on the basketball like he was before, but nonetheless, he is still vital for this team. And then we just saw. Speaking of Jordan Poole, we just saw him get his extension. We just saw Andrew Wiggins get his extension as well. And Andrew Wiggins for me has always been a phenomenal scorer. But he joined the Warriors last year, and especially in the playoffs, we saw Wiggins step up at the defensive end of the floor. And for the Warriors' success over recent years, for as much attention that they receive at the offensive end of the floor, this team knows how to hunker down and play D in those key moments. And I think Wiggins is definitely living proof of that. You also have, Jonathan Kaminga. You bring back Kevon Looney. You add Dante DiVincenzo to this team, and if Dante DiVincenzo is healthy, I think he could be an X factor off of this bench for Steve Kerr. Also, James Wiseman, can he stay healthy as well? So, there's a lot of parts to this team. I know that they lost Gary Payton II in free agency to Portland, but nonetheless, this Warriors team, is once again poised, in my opinion, to make a title run. But you can't just pencil in Golden State out west because I look at the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Clippers are a huge enigma because it all comes down to whether or not that the Clips are going to be healthy. And it starts with Kawhi Leonard. The knees, how are they going to hold up? You got Paul George, but Paul George is expected to be back, but it comes down to Kawhi Leonard. You also signed John Wall. John Wall he's been a guy who's had an injury history throughout his career as well. But then you look at some of the other factors on this team, Reggie Jackson, you got Norman Powell, you bring in Robert Covington, Luke Kennard, Marcus Morris, Ivica Zubac. There's a lot of talent here for head coach Tyronn Lue just to try to get it all together. That's going to be the biggest thing. But I think the biggest if for the Clippers is whether or not that they can stay healthy. Now, last year we saw the Memphis Grizzlies be one of the top teams in the West, get to the Western Conference semis, but will they be able to build off of that? You think about Taylor Jenkins in each year that he's been the head coach of the Grizzlies, this team's win total has increased. Ja Morant is a special player at guard for Memphis. He's a potential MVP candidate, but he's got to find a way to stay healthy as he missed 25 games last year. But in his absence, these Grizzlies didn't skip a beat. You got Dylan Brooks back there, Desmond Bain, and Jaron Jackson Jr. But I think a big thing for me for Memphis was them acquiring Danny Green for DeAnthony Melton. Danny Green is a solid shooter, but more importantly, he's a veteran that can come in and he knows a thing or two about winning in the postseason, and I think that experience will help this Grizzlies team as the season progresses. Now, for the Phoenix Suns, they won 64 games last season, but are they due for a step back? The Western Conference has gotten better. We saw the Suns bow out in the second round, courtesy of the Dallas Mavericks. Phoenix held a 2-0 lead in that series. They then held a 3-2 lead, and they couldn't get it done as they were literally run off of their own home floor in game seven. Of course, there's going to be question marks. Will the Suns have a playoff hangover? We got to wait and see. There's still plenty of talent on this team for head coach Monty Williams. You have Devin Booker, who was one of the premier scorers in the NBA. We saw this team match the offer for DeAndre Ayton to bring him back. You also have Mikal Bridges, but when it's all said and done, I think it comes down to Chris Paul. Chris Paul obviously is an older player now, 37 years of age. Can the Suns keep him healthy enough in order to make another title run? We're going to have to wait and see. You look at the Denver Nuggets, and will they be able to be healthy this year? Nikola Jokic is the two-time reigning NBA MVP. We know what he can do, but one person cannot do it by themselves. And we saw a couple of years ago the Nuggets give a ton of money to both Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. Neither one of those guys has been healthy. Murray missed all of last year. Porter was literally there for a cup of coffee. So the Nuggets have shown that they can win for head coach Michael Malone in the regular season without Murray and Porter Jr. But if this team is going to make some type of noise in the postseason, Jokic is going to have to get some help, which means that both Murray and Porter are going to have to be healthy. Now, for the Minnesota Timberwolves, will they be able to live up to expectations? And of course, the T Wolves, they got to the play-in tournament last year. They won. They put a little bit of a scare into the Memphis Grizzlies last year in the first round before bowing out. And you look at this Timberwolves team, they're young, they have all of the talent in the world, but the biggest thing is, will they be able to live up to expectations? For me, I know that Carl Anthony Towns has a three-point shooting championship on his resume, but I feel like, a lot of times Towns plays outside too much. And I'll say the same thing about him that I've said about Giannis and Anthony Davis. When they are playing closer to the basket, 15 feet and in, there's not a lot of people in the NBA that can stop them. And I really think for this Timberwolves team to take that next step, Carl Anthony Towns needs to be more efficient and not take as many three-point shots. You have D'Angelo Russell, excuse me, who is a great complementary guard to Towns, and then Anthony Edwards is really showing his athleticism, and he continues to get better. But for me, the Timberwolves have to get better at the defensive end of the floor, as they were 24th last season in points allowed. So what do? Minnesota gave up a lot to go out there and acquire Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz. And of course, Gobert gives them a bona fide rim protector. And it's a situation for Gobert with the Timberwolves. They don't have to worry about him scoring because they don't need him. You have Carl Anthony Towns. So he's going to be that anchor on the defensive end of the floor. But just let's see how everything comes together as the season progresses in Minneapolis. Now, for the Dallas Mavericks, they definitely want to try to find a way to keep building. This Mavericks team won 52 games last season and made the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 2011, which was the only year in which they won the NBA championship. Luka Doncic is a bona fide NBA MVP candidate. Maybe this is a year that he breaks through and wins that award. Now, losing Jalen Brunson will hurt the Mavericks short term, but you still have Spencer Dinwiddie and Tim Hardaway Jr. And then I love what Dallas was able to do. They got some more size in order to do things defensively and get rebounds by adding both JaVale McGee and Christian Wood. Now, the Jason Kidd factor. Will the Mavericks take a step back this year? under him as their head coach, or will they keep trudging forward? That's going to be the $1 million question. Now, for the Los Angeles Lakers, is this a bounce back season for them? The Lakers surprisingly only won 33 games last year, and there was a ton of Hall of Fame talent on that team. Several guys that were on the NBA's 75th anniversary team, but when it was all said and done, the Lakers darn near lost 50 games. So what do? Out with Frank Vogel as the head coach and in with Darvin Ham. Now, for me, first things first, the Lakers have to change their strategy for a lot of things because the talent is still there for this team to be a playoff team. I mean, number one, the Lakers have to get better defensively as only the Kings and Rockets allowed more points per game than Los Angeles, which is disturbing and surprising. But when you see that, it's a pretty good reason is why the Lakers had the record that they did. LA was 22nd in three-point field goal percentage last year. And the thing about it is this team shoots too many three-point shots. Russell Westbrook is not a perimeter player. LeBron can hit the three-point shot, but I like again, LeBron is one of those players throughout his career. He's at his best when he's getting to the basket and when he's posting up. And that's something, of course, here in year number 20, LeBron's going to be 38 in December, that I think he still needs to focus on. But you think about LeBron James, one of the best players to have ever done it in NBA history. And of course, LeBron James alone, when you think about him, you think about making a run at the NBA title. But for all it's worth, it's going to come down to whether or not Anthony Davis is healthy. Because when you go back to when the Lakers won that title in 2020, Anthony Davis, especially in the postseason, played like a man possessed. He has not been that hungry, in my opinion, since LA won that championship. And it's going to come down to what he can or cannot do. Now, I did briefly mention Russell Westbrook. To me, I feel like Russell Westbrook has been an odd man out from the word go in LA because you look at it, some people at least, are all of a sudden expecting Russ to go out there and be a perimeter scorer. And throughout his career, that's not his game. Russell Westbrook is not a perimeter player. He's at his best when he's getting to the basket. And historically, with a guy like LeBron, you need to put shooters around him. Russell is not that guy. Now, there was talks about the Lakers trying Westbrook coming off of the bench in their final preseason game, and then he got injured. So let's see where that strategy is going to play out when the season begins for the purple and gold. You bring in Pat Bev, and it's going to be interesting to see how things work out with Pat Bev and Russ. They've had their issues throughout their respective careers, and then you also bring in Dennis Schroeder. So for me, I think again it all starts with the Lakers on the defensive end, and from there, I think this team we'll be able to build. And then we get an idea as far as how things are going to work out for LA this season. Now, the Utah Jazz, who after 6 straight years of making the postseason, they're going to look a lot different. And you knew that the writing was on the wall as soon as Danny Ainge was brought into this front office. Quinn Snyder, after 8 seasons, is no longer the Jazz's head coach. You have Will Hardy in there, former Celtics assistant. Donovan Mitchell was traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. One player that came back to Utah in that deal, you got to keep an eye on is going to be Colin Sexton. The Jazz aren't expected to be good, but I do expect Sexton to put up his numbers this year. I talked about Rudy Gobert getting traded to the Timberwolves. We saw Utah get a ton of picks back for that. One player, in my opinion, to keep an eye on, maybe not this year, but as the seasons progress, is going to be Walker Kessler. He was a first round pick of Minnesota this year out of Auburn. Last season, collegiately, he did have 5 blocks per game. So now basically you have a cheaper version of Rudy Gobert who can still go out there and block shots. Let's just see how Kessler gets adjusted to the NBA game. Now, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be rebuilding time altogether for the Jazz as 3 of their top scorers from last year's team are now playing for other teams around the NBA. But again, you knew this transition, what period was coming here for the Jazz. Now, for the New Orleans Pelicans, will they be able to live up to the hype? We saw the Pelicans break through and get to the play-in tournament last year. And then on top of that, they got to the playoffs. They gave the Phoenix Suns a big time scare in that first round last year. And these youngsters definitely want to build off of that. Zion Williamson is back. excuse me, he's healthy. And how is he going to fit in with this team? Because we've seen Brandon Ingram, what he can do when he's healthy. CJ McCollum came in and gave them another scorer after he was acquired last year from Portland. You have a big man who with some touch with Jonas Valanciunas. And for head coach Willie Green, he knows he has a young team, but they got to find a way to take that next step there. Now, for the Portland Trailblazers, will the return of Damian Lillard help them get back on track in the West? Because you think about it, when it's Dame time, Portland can get to the postseason, but usually for the most part, they're one and done. Now, Lillard is on pace to become the franchise's all-time leading scorer this year, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And how will things work out for year two for Chauncey Billups as Portland's head coach? Now, aside from Lillard, they do have some solid complementary players in Portland. You think about Josh Hart, Anthony Simons, Yusuf Nurkic, Drew Eubanks, Justice Winslow, and of course bringing in a defensive stalwart like Gary Payton II. Not as great as his father was, the Hall of Famer, but nonetheless he is still a guy. So it's going to be interesting to see if all of this can come together and Portland can make some noise in the West. Now, for the San Antonio Spurs, the glory days are gone. And after making 22 consecutive postseason appearances, which included 5 NBA championships, the Spurs have missed the postseason in each of the last three. Greg Popovich, the NBA's all-time leading head leader in the category for head coaching victories, excuse me. It's going to be interesting to see how long he stays around during this rebuild. The Deontay Murray trade to the Hawks, obviously, you know that the Spurs, are still trying to figure it out. You got Keldon Johnson and Jakob Poeltl. Devin Vassell is somebody to keep an eye on, as is Doug McDermott. But I really don't see the Spurs making too much noise out west. Now, for the Sacramento Kings, they have the longest active playoff drought in the NBA. The Kings have not made the postseason since 2006, and you got to wonder if that's going to continue. A new head coach in Mike Brown, but the thing is for Sacramento, like it is with several other teams, you got to get better at the defensive end of the floor, as only the Rockets allowed more points per game than the Kings last year. You have De'Aaron Fox, who is a phenomenal scorer. You got Harrison Barnes, Malik Monks, and Demontis Sabonis. But the bottom line is, I think the Kings are going to put up points, but until they can find a way to get better at the defensive end of the floor, it's not going to amount to that much. Now, the rebuild continues for the Oklahoma City Thunder as they've lost 108 games over the last 2 years alone. Now, they took Chet Holmgren early in this year's NBA draft. He's out, and then Shai Alexander is injured as well. So with that said, I mean, it's going to be on guys like Josh Giddey and LaQuince Dart, but it's going to be tough sledding for the Thunder. And finally, you got the Rockets. And I mean, will they be able to show some signs of improvement? And, I talked about teams with defensive woes. And of course, I just mentioned the Kings, but nobody allowed more points per game last year than the Rockets. We saw Christian Wood leave, and he's now with the Mavericks. You still have Jalen Green and Kevin Porter and Eric Gordon, Jayshawn Tate, and Jabari Smith, who was the third overall pick. But for the most part, sans Eric Gordon, this is a very young team for Steven Silas, as he has to find a way to go out there and make this team respectable. So when it's all said and done, I believe the Golden State is a lock for the playoffs. The Clippers should get there. For me, again, it comes down to health. Of course, it starts with Kawhi Leonard. Memphis, Memphis is going to be in that mix. I think Phoenix will once again be a playoff team. You got to keep an eye out for Denver and Minnesota in that mix as well. How are things going to work out for Dallas? The Lakers, I think, will once again be a player, because the thing was, at the end of the day, everybody from top to bottom in that organization was embarrassed last year, and they definitely want to bounce back. Utah's taking a step back. I think New Orleans will be in the mix for a postseason berth, and Portland most likely will be playing tournament bound. They'll probably have to fight with the Spurs. But for the Kings, the Thunder, and Rockets, I think they're once again going to be fighting an uphill battle. So, with that said, the balls are going to be thrown up in the air on Tuesday night, and a race is on to see who is going to dethrone the Golden State Warriors in the West. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 pounds of sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.